It's a little bit later than we're used to coming on Thursdays, but it's because we wanted to go ahead and finish up the debate here over at Not Playing Politics, so we could speak on it a little bit more informed. This is Alexander Keaton. I'm with, as always, my Rio Nick Bradshaw. Nick, let's we got less than 30 minutes now. Let's cut to the chase. Bradshaw. What was your thought of the overall debate? What was going on?
So, I thought obviously the conduct was a lot better all around. I thought that the topics, you could definitely see Kristen Welker bring the topics back to racial concepts and environmental concepts and things that I think are going to reflect well on Biden's side. I think that, the strategy that I kind of noticed, I commented on this with a group I was chatting with during the debate. It seemed like what it would be is President Trump hears a question, cut him off. President Biden, do you want to clean this up for him? Right. It was ask Trump and then let Biden answer. Put Trump as the person. So the strategy behind it is Trump is the one being interrogated and Biden's the one providing clarity. It's a strategy that I saw pretty clearly. I mean, I thought similar to what the president said. I thought in the first half hour or so, she was kind of calling balls and strikes. As the night went on, she very much had to wrangle in Trump more. Now, that's also just their personalities. Biden's not going to be one to challenge her back. I also felt that Biden came across as quite tired. He was stammering quite frequently, and what he wanted to present as impassioned almost looked angry. It was also funny to see him as the one that I think Trump was trying to juxtapose against, to be like, Joe, you want to shut everything down and close it and kill the economy. I want to open things up and get kids back to school and get the economy going. And it was funny because it was like the upbeat, positive Republican businessman versus, your kind of prototypical emotionally driven, socially minded Democrat. So overall, I thought it was obviously significantly better than the first one. I thought the conversation was good. I felt that they did stay on certain topics or just return to those same topics again and again. That's fine. Overall, I think they both fared better than they did before. I did think Trump had a couple of strong one-liners to get in there.
Yeah, there were definitely some one-liners from him, and some. The thing that I noticed, though, wasn't just that she was all about interrupting him, but not necessarily interrupting Biden. And like you said, she was very much setting these questions up for Biden. I was surprised that she actually talked about the Hunter Biden thing at all, but it was very clear that she did not press him. Forget the Hunter Biden laptop issue. She didn't. Not only did she not press him on that, she didn't press him on pretty much anything. With Trump, she was like, do you want to get into that a little bit more? Or what about this? It's like, but she let whatever Biden say sort of stood. It's like, yep, well, that's true. Like she
kind of spoke in platitudes. I mean, the line that he used, which the President Obama used. I mean, it's a line, and it's a good line. He's like, there's not red states and blue states. They're the United States. That's an Obama line, and I mean, he's running to that every time. But where Trump came through. And it's funny because that's not how a Biden administration would govern. I mean, you already seen Democrats did not even show up to Judge Barrett's vote. They literally all of them left the Senate Judiciary Committee. I'm not going to go down that path tonight because we're on a shorter timetable. But this concept that Joe Biden's going to come into office and then America's just going to go back to the way that it was, I think, is a fallacious leap to make. I further think that Trump finally exercised some rhetorical restraint, and it carried weight when he said things like, Joe, I think, do you want to address this tonight? Do you want to address what these things are going on? And of course, with the laptops, Russia, anytime right. It's, you know what I mean? Like Russia always works in his favor. It's either Russia that was helping Trump or Russia that's against him. Now, that's the same thing that every politician can say in every direction. I get it. But I thought Trump's perspective on saying, do you want to answer that? And then he was quiet to leave that silence there, to the point that Welker actually jumped in, I believe, if I recall this part correctly, and said, do you want to address that?
Yeah.
I also think when he said the other part about and I missed it briefly because I was just, like I said, I'm sitting here, I'm texting with one group and I'm listening to this. And what he said was the line with regard to oil when he called him out on that. And he goes, "Oh, so you basically saying we want to get rid of oil."
Yeah.
And then he goes and he looks at the camera and goes, "Did you hear that, Texas?"
Yes, exactly. In Pennsylvania. Yeah. No.
Look, the polls are turning. If you're starting to see, and I'm not talking about the national polls, which are kind of superfluous and incongruous and not really accurate, and not even so much the state polls with regard to percentages, but more so what we're actually seeing coming out. Democrats who use by mail and Democrats who typically vote early are coming in underperforming in certain states. Republicans may be behind them. That can be observed. We have to call balls and strikes here. Republicans are behind in many of the swing states, in many of these areas. That's a fact. But their percentages with which they are coming in at are not only significantly higher than they've been before, in states that Trump previously won, also being behind in 2016 at the same time.
Right. Exactly.
But what's different is that the Democrat numbers are not where everyone projected them. You know, this was going to be 4 years of built up frustration, and they were going to be able to vent and just shred the ballot box. And that's not really happening. And the president just hit 52% of approval, as opposed to President Obama being at 50% at the same time with the same poll to the same date. So the president is overperforming where he was in his own victory last time. We will see what happens. I don't want to. I want to kick it back to you. I don't want to just hog the part here. But the next topic I want to look at this is how this performance is also bringing up that support that we're now talking about a senator from the state of Minnesota closing a 12-point gap to the point of 1%. We don't have to go down that road because we don't have time necessarily tonight, but rising tides raises all ships, right? And
right.
We'll see what happens. But I do want to get to the other subject we discussed, and I think you brought that up. They talked about it, and they brought Hunter Biden into this, and the president, I thought he did it effectively. It didn't sound like he was harping, Hunter. But he brought it up towards the beginning. They recognized it, and then immediately turned it into, do you want to address this? And the pre-conference with the gentleman the former naval officer who was talking about, look, I was there. This isn't even a whistleblower. This isn't a guy going behind secret closed doors. This is a guy publicly coming out and saying, I've got the text messages. Here they are.
Well, let's maybe take a step back, because maybe not everyone has heard sort of where we are now with this thing. But let's catch everyone up. I imagine most everyone who's watching this show is aware that there was a hard drive produced that purportedly is coming from a laptop that was owned by and used by Hunter Biden. It was dropped off. It was abandoned. The person who was repairing that laptop saw what was on it, that there was, and there is, I'm going to be very loose with this language, or very precise with my language rather, because there are allegations, some really severe allegations on there. But I don't want to get too far into that at the moment. That there was information on there that was very, very disturbing. Among this disturbing information were emails and texts from Hunter Biden to these rather influential and powerful individuals within Burisma, within the Ukrainian government, that indicated that the story that was going on at the time for him, that he could hear, was incorrect about Joe Biden not having nothing to do with Hunter Biden's stuff, and that is essentially indicated that Hunter Biden was the bag man for Joe's cash. It actually literally puts Joe Biden in, instead of it being just Hunter Biden's floating around the world using the name to get cash, it's Joe Biden sort of turning a blind eye to it. Now it is basically he's the front man to give Joe he's the middleman selling Joe's name and influence on his behalf. That's what those emails sort of indicate. Now, what literally came out today was The gentleman's name, I've heard it several times. I still don't remember it, but he
Bob-
was a
Bobulinski.
yeah. Thank you, Bobulinski, and he was involved in a lot of these transactions. He ran a He was the CEO of a corporation that Hunter Biden was working with, and he has come out and said, A, yes, these emails are legitimate. B, he was involved in these transactions, and that, yes, C, Joe Biden is absolutely behind it. He saw it firsthand, and which is why he said he took steps to sort of avoid it, because Hunter Biden was using this corporation as his own personal piggy bank. This person has publicly confirmed that Joe Biden was selling influence using Hunter Biden as his go-between, and this may be one of the more disturbing crimes. I mean, this is a crime that is being discussed, and so that's now that we're all sort of more or less caught up to what we know to be, at least verified. What I think how Trump handled it, I thought was very well was excellent, because, like you said, he basically mentioned Hunter, but instead of focusing on Hunter, it was, Joe, you're getting bought by China, by Russia, by Ukraine. They're buying you. You need to talk about this.
Well, I think it's interesting. There were other things going on that I thought also carried some interesting moments. Again, I think overall, Biden looked tired this time. You could hear him. Some of the comments I was seeing and getting from people was, you could pick up on the slurring. You could pick up on those changes. And I'm not here to make fun of that at all. I've maintained from the beginning that I think that there are things that need to be addressed concerning this, and I take it very seriously. In fact, it's not some punchline like ha ha ha. See, he's struggling. It's something that I think has to be addressed and taken very seriously. To capabilities of executing a position that you're potentially running for. I think the fact that the president did is he said, look, you've got all this money coming in. Remember, the president was impeached based off of a supposed whistleblower comment regarding someone listening to a phone call, yet there were probably 8 to 15 other people, or whatever the number may have been, listening in at the same time and saying that it was fine. The irony of being in a position that now something with Ukraine, something with the presidential election, and something coming together with this almost pattern of events that happens between, tell me if this sounds familiar. Russian and/or related regions plus laptop plus email equals 2016 or 2020.
Yeah.
And there's a pattern, that we're seeing. I think another thing is that, we have to ask ourselves, do you think that if this person were to come out on the other side with this evidence and say, nope, I was there, saw it firsthand, that this wouldn't be an immediate independent counsel being called to investigate? So we'll see what happens. I'm very fascinated to see how this actually goes. I think Biden wanted to play the Hitler card, which I think came across very awkwardly. It didn't seem to resonate. It seemed to come across like, what? I think he also talked about the concept of going after oil the way that he did, and I think that's interesting. I think that overall, the people that were in one camp are going to stay there, and people that are in another are going to stay there. But I think there may have been one or two minds changed in either direction. This one created an environment of a little more movement, I think, for people to have a discussion. I do think that the moderator was, I'm not going to take it as far as biased. I think she provided an opportunity to soften the experience for Biden over Trump. I think she created a platform for his message to maybe come out more smoothly than she did Trump. I'm not super familiar with Kristen Welker other than what I've read recently regarding her, her close ties, both through her family and her personal ties to that of the Democrat Party. And there's extensive literature on that. Anyone following the show can follow that up. You can see where donations are made to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars from people around her, and partly of her participation through voting and whatnot. But what I would say is at the end of this, I think the president conducted himself much better. I think right now, I don't know that policy is winning people over. I think now it's coming down to that gut instinct where Trump is simply saying, where do you want the economy to go? Biden's talking about a massive overhaul and a redesignation. And, they didn't want to use the scary word socialist, but I mean, his topics are, of the bent that they're going to head that direction just by the nature of what he wants to do. Yeah. So we'll see. I thought it was great when President Trump asked him directly about fracking, because he was like, you weren't for fracking until you were, and then you were only when you got to Pennsylvania, and then it stopped when you got out. And he said, well, no, I'm never going to do anything like that. I'm never going to, I'm not. He said, put up a video. And Trump goes, okay, I'll put up a video.
Yeah.
It was an interesting concept. It was a very kind of, kids on the playground.
Well, okay, so real quick to that, and then I want to circle back to what you said earlier, or sort of re-examine some of the things you said just a second ago. But I think Trump, and I think everyone is missing a really great opportunity at these things, because we've already discussed that these aren't really debates. They're more like it's like competing speeches, stump speeches. I think the next presidential candidate, or the next any candidate who comes out and says, I'm going to put all of my thoughts on a website, short videos on each subject, how I would approach it with my plan, and I'll have everything written out. It just goes like, you want to know how I think about this? Here's my thoughts on it. Here's how we're going to get there, right? All they would need to do is literally sit there, pop a can of Coke, and say, I think X, Y, Z. If you doubt me, go to my website, www.politiciansrus.com, and you can watch my video where I also have my plan listed out, very short, very succinct. Any question you have about me is right there. Those are my pledges. That is what I plan to do. I'm not taking pledges to anyone else or on the stump. It's like, this is who I am. And like, you make a quick introductory speech, and every question is, I believe this, 2-3 word answer, and you can confirm it with more detail on my website. And again, to the idea of your competition, right? Having a video for them, I think is great. It's like, here's my competitor saying XYZ, right? This is something everyone, I think a lot of politicians are missing out on. That's a real opportunity, right? You could really go out of your way to reshape this entire conversation by telling people, just go to my website and watch my videos if you have any questions about me. Whatever question is important to you, I have it listed there. Now, to circle back about whether or not she was biased, I think she was. So there's two kinds of biases, right? There's sort of that proactive bias that we're used to, where it's every question is clearly designed to come at Trump and benefit Biden. But then you have, I think, what she was doing, which is much more subtle, which is she's not being overtly biased, but rather she's, like you said, she allows or creates an environment in which Biden can blossom, right? That she
wasn't throwing Biden the fastball. She just wasn't. I mean, you could tell the environment was not designed that way. It wasn't. That's not what happened. It was a different environment that was present. Forgive me for jumping in. I think that's the part that it was. If you want to call it a passive bias, okay, an unconscious bias when it would come to certain perspectives, more on the kind of a thought feeling.
I don't think it was. I don't think it was unconscious at all.
Yeah, well, all that I'm saying is that I think that from a tactical standpoint, I think there was a little bit of that. I think, to be quite honest, some of that is also just human nature, and I want to make sure that again, on the show, that we try to keep it balls and strikes as much as we can. I don't necessarily think that every single action that a person takes all of the time is driven by some deep, scandalous bias in their heart. I think sometimes Biden comes across softer. He comes across more gentle. He comes across more reactive. You know, he's going to go to those platitudes. All right, now look, here's what we're going to do. I mean, he used the phrase malarkey, right?
Right.
You know, he's gonna. Trump is waiting for you to finish your sentence so that he can answer.
Right, because he's a shark.
And so he's coming at you 100%. Biden doesn't necessarily do that. And the pattern that she filled, which I thought was interesting, was go to Trump, tee up a question, he'll knock it off with some comment that'll take it in some direction, and then go. And there were several times when she literally would say, well, I want to get to the vice president, or something to the fact of, I want to get to the vice president on this, and look at this. I think the difference is also in terms of vitality. I think Trump just looked more engaged. Biden looked responsive. Trump looked he wanted. See, Trump's problem with this is that he thinks if he can get everybody, and he thinks he's doing it the right way, which is, if I can get everybody the information, they'll be blown away. If everybody just knew what I knew, then they would make the right decision, which I think actually lends credence to his faith in the American electorate. If you guys know this, you make a common sense decision. Biden, I think Biden's an old politician. He believes in platitudes. He believes in, let me tell you about when snow cones only cost a nickel. What are you going to say to the people? We're going to work together. I like that the president said, what did you do with regard to the cages? It was your administration that built them. Why did you put them there? And you could see people trying to work around that one, tried to work to break that apart a little bit. I know that tonight it may seem as though, we're taking the show way more towards Trump's direction, and that's not what my intention is. I just think tonight was a very clear-cut example of the difference between offense and defense, and how the moderator, once again, I think she did a significantly better job than Chris Wallace. But I think she also, I don't want to go as far as saying she stacked the deck in Biden's favor, but I think she gave him the cards a little bit early, and maybe gave him a chance to take a peek at what his top face card was.
So here's what she did. She didn't stack the deck, but she sure gave him a handicap.
It just seemed like the rhetorical tactic seemed to be, Mr. President, again, this has happened under your watch. What do you have to say? Mr. Vice President, do you have a response? A couple of times, though, she did say, Mr. Vice President, this did happen while you were Vice President. What do you have to say about that? I thought Biden took ownership when he said, we got the bill wrong, the crime bill wrong. I thought that was fascinating. I thought that was an interesting call. I appreciate accountability. I don't like it when people say, you could tell how people don't understand how government fundamentally works with three branches, when she said, why didn't you get this coronavirus passed? But you're the president. And it was like, right, but you realize there was a Congress, right? And originally our founders drafted it that the Congress would hold the power, and that we've just empowered and given way to a president, because I think, as we may have discussed on the show before, I think it's human nature to look to someone to lead you. I think it's human nature to think about leadership or being led by a one and not by a many. Most people don't sit around and talk about 100 different senators and 435 members of the House. They think about a president.
Right.
So we'll see. I thought overall much better. I think the polls are going to be interesting to watch. The Trump campaign has been, and the president in particular, has been on a rise, and he's certainly doing it at the right time. But I don't know
exactly. I agree. I think there's a lot of interesting things here. Again, I want to circle back to what you said about changing minds, because this is really where I want to go with it. I don't think there's anything about this per se that would necessarily. I don't think this debate would change anyone's minds per se, but I do think the way Trump talked about the Hunter Biden scandal, he did focus more on Joe than Hunter. I think he did say some things that a lot of people have not heard yet. I think it might cause, what will happen is, I think some people are going to start looking at things, right? I think it's going to cause people to ask questions, and as they ask questions, as this story is gaining, I think some people are going to start looking, and I think that will have a much larger effect. It's not anything that Trump himself is saying or doing, but rather the people are starting to learn things now just as they're coming out. I think as people start to look at it, like you said, it sort of speaks to Trump's faith in people, saying, if you knew what I knew, if you knew the facts, you would make the same decision. I think the way Trump handled it is saying, hey, here's something you probably haven't heard. It's going to get people to ask questions, and that's going to drive them to look for answers, and that may actually be what pushes people over the edge. I mean, look at what happened with 50 Cent, as the kids say.
The line about I want to back up his tax plan because I don't want to be 20 cent. That was funny. That was really funny.
Well, but that's the thing, right? And all day I've seen people on both sides posting those photos of Mike Pence with Mr. Cent's face on it, and it was 50 pence, right? But they're doing the same thing with Ice Cube.
Pence. That's really good. I like that. I didn't see that.
But here's the thing, right? On all of that I think is way more indicative with what Ice Cube did. Because so again, some people may not be aware, Ice Cube caught a lot of crap because he was working with the Trump administration, because he basically said, hey, I got some ideas that will help the Black community. He put out there, I want somebody to work with me on this. He goes to Democrats, and they're like, well, we'll talk about it after the election. We'll deal with it after the election. We'll deal with it after the election. But the Trump administration said, hey, we're doing the Platinum Plan. We like some of your ideas. Let's integrate what we can. Let's see what we can do with this. And so he was working with it, and a bunch of Democrats came out against him and attacked him for working with the Trump administration. He's like, look, he flat out said, hey, we're getting shined on by these Democrats. I want to work with whoever's willing to work with us to help what, he's, as he said, my people. And Snoop Dogg came to his defense, right?
Can I say for our listeners out there, the fact that in the last 3.5 minutes you have referenced Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, and 50 Cent.
50
discussion context.
50 Cent. Don't be white on me here. 50 Cent.
Of it's your birthday. We're gonna party like it's your birthday.
Birthday.
Wow. We are at a time that we have looked at the political realm through a very interesting lens, my friend. Very interesting lens.
But here's the thing, though. We this is something that I think conservatives, Christians, those on the right have often gotten wrong. And this is a criticism that I've had for a very long time. We have not really addressed pop culture. We've not really tried to address it by putting our ideas out there. And I think one of the biggest mistakes the conservatives have made has been to not really go to the Black community and say, look, this is what we want to do for you and with you, and here's why. You can make arguments. And I mean, basically, every election, Republicans just said, we're not getting this demographic, and just sort of ignored it for a very long time. It's only been with the rise. Now, again, we can argue that, one of the reasons for it is because there was just no room. There was no seemingly any play, and those African Americans who did were immediately ostracized. Right? I mean, you want to see some racism? Go look up. I mean, any Black conservatives Facebook page or Instagram page or Twitter feed, and just look at the comments. You will find real racism there from the left. Period. End of story. I know people who've been beaten because they were Black and supported the president. Now, that having been said, I think the conservatives and everyone on the right, it was malpractice and ultimately damaging to these communities to not have more proactively gone out and worked with not just the Black community, but the thought leaders within the Black community, those who lead popular culture. Whether you're Black or you're white, as much as I hate to say it, actors and singers and performers, this is what people listen to, they cling to. Hollywood has real power. The fact that Mr. Cent, Mr. Cube, and Mr. Dog, even though and let's face it, Mr. Dog is not a Trump fan, but he came to support of Mr. Cube. These mean things. In the same year that the Brexit sort of movement is gaining power, as is the walk away gaining power, this occurs. This means something. This is substantial, and it's time for people on the right to really make to really step up and make a really good argument, because no one's going to vote for you unless you show them why they should vote for you.
Well, I think, we talked about this last time, and I think it's an important fact. We live in the age of immediacy, right? We live in the age of novelty. We live in the age of gotchaism. We live in the age of of information, the information age. And so already the Trump campaign, actually Donald Trump himself, coming from his Twitter feed, has put up the video and titled it, "Here you go, at Joe Biden." And it's him making the comment that he never said that about fracking.
Yeah.
Now, the part that I think is interesting, that really stood out, and I actually commented on this with the chat group I was in during the time, and it was one line in particular that stood out amongst anything to me. And it was the line of the night. Just for fun, I just love listening whenever someone says, "I love the environment." That was great. But the one, because it always reminds me of the movie The Aviator, when he's like, it's weather, Mr. Hughes. That's what weather does. It changes. It moves.
Yeah.
Move. But the line of the night is when he got it up and he says, "Then why didn't you do it?" That's the line. And the other ones that stood out to me were, what did you get done? You were there for 8 years, always the same with you politicians. And that was that populist line, right? That was that populist appeal. It's Trump going back to that, "I'm not a politician." He said, "I ran because of you."
Yes. I thought those were excellent lines. And
Biden has said the same thing about Trump. I mean,
right, exactly.
Everyone's ripping everybody off, right? And the Stones were the Beatles in a different direction, and you got this band because of this band, and this band because of this band, and all that I'm getting at is, I think that tonight the other accountable piece, is it's so funny to hear them just using their own talking points at each other, whether it's Trump to Biden or Biden to Trump. Everyone's doing it. At the end of the day, the vote that you have to do to determine who you're going to vote for has to come down. If you want to do it based off of an informed perspective and not an emotional reaction, you have to think about it. You have to think about it on a different plane. You don't have to like the person, but you have to ask if they are good for whatever it is, your job, your family, your country, your church, whatever. Sometimes those people are the ones that are needed to bring about whatever it is. Some may see Biden that way, some may see Trump that way. What's interesting to me about this election is that I have yet to run into anybody who's excited about Biden. That's not because I'm making him the Democrat and no one likes. That's not what I'm saying. Barack Obama's campaign in 2008 captured a magical level of energy. I mean, it was unbridled. People were all over the place, were motivated, and you could see it and feel it. I don't know that you feel that as much with Trump, because people, I think there is an actual, and I think it sounds childish to say a secret Trump voter. It sounds like we have a pillow fort with a sticker on it that says "No girls allowed." But I do think that there are many people who do not want to discuss that topic. They don't want to talk about whether they're a Trump supporter or not. I also think people have got so much fatigue right now that, COVID, I think, was a distraction in many ways from having this political atmosphere, run 2020 for the last 9 months.
Yeah. I agree there. But as far as the secret Trump voter, I want to focus on, I just want to point something you set out very precisely. Then I want to end on this one question. And I want to hear your answer to it, because the secret Trump voters, like, people don't want to talk about it. Why? Because there is real violence associated from those who do not support Trump. those who oppose those who are find themselves in opposition to Trump, who oppose Trump, are there is a threat of violence that is sort of leveled. If now that violence can be physical, it could be financial, but that threat absolutely exists. And that is, I think, I think that's more profound than people realize, and that is absolutely driving this sort of quote unquote secret voter, which undermines sort of the question that, like you pointed out, that Trump kept leveling. That I thought was very well. It was like, well, why didn't you change it? Why didn't you do something? You had 8 years. You've been in there for 47 years. Why didn't you do it? I'm going to connect that question to the Hunter Biden laptop by saying this. And I want this to be the last sort of, I want to hear you. This is sort of the question for me that really encapsulates the whole night, and it really drives home the difference here. They didn't want to talk about foreign policy, though Trump absolutely did. Why? Because he's had nothing but success in that realm. He literally ended a 60-year war. He's getting implacable enemies like the Serbs in Croatia. He's getting them to talk. He's generating peace amongst Israel and in her neighbors. He's been very successful with this. In his 3 years, he has done a lot to help the Black and other minority communities. So the question is this: why then have we not seen this other kind of success with these other politicians like Joe Biden, who've been there for decades at a time? And I go back to the event. This is where the Hunter Biden laptop comes in. What did we learn? This is how these politicians are becoming millionaires. They are making money off of the problems. They are not making money off of solutions. So my question here is, this return to normalcy that Biden is sort of selling himself on, or let me rephrase this: the people who are behind the Biden presidential campaign are trying to sell Biden to us on, is a return to normalcy. The return to normalcy is a return to people who are not going to fix the problem. They don't want to fix the problem. They have no incentive to fix the problem. They like the fact that there are poor Black kids who are getting shot by cops. They like the idea that there is a belief that poor Black kids will be shot more often than cops, because they want that divisiveness. They like the idea of poverty. They like the idea of these things because it gives them something to run on and something to be bought for. I think his question about why didn't you do something about these problems over this time period is the crux that really the entire American people need to answer. Why are we still having the same conversations after 20 and 30 and 40 years of these problems? And yet Trump magically could wave the magic wand that Obama claimed that he was supposedly had to fix it. Why? Because they are paid to perpetuate issues and problems, not fix them.
Well, I'm going to push back on one thing and say my hope and prayer for the welfare of not only our country but humanity is that nobody would ever look to the killing of innocent life for the preservation of their own. I think that it is a darkness that's of biblical proportion, and I pray that's not the case. I would also say to the concept or the phraseology behind those that use, which is what I think you're also drawing at, which is to say, the war's not meant to be won, it's meant to be sustained. And that's a dangerous way to look at things, because I think you're right. It prevents solution. I've said many times on this show, whether you like Donald Trump or not, he's a consequential executive in the executive branch of government. It has shown what happens when you actually, politics is unique. It's an environment that you take people with varied backgrounds, myriad backgrounds, and pull them together to do a fairly similar job. I mean, I'm not saying that every member of Congress has the same background, because they don't. But overall, they articulate the lawmaking, the distributing, the campaigning, whatever. The overall nuts and bolts of being a representative in the House of Representatives, it's not a cookie cutter, but like any job, there's a standard process. You don't have to be Babe Ruth, but I'm pretty sure Mark McGwire went to batting practice.
Yeah, once or twice.
Yeah, once or twice, 70 times in one season. No, but what I'm getting at is you've got to look at it. Hashtag asterisk. But what I'm getting at is if you incentivize an environment for people to have just unbridled wealth and power thrust upon them as people that are seeking unbridled wealth and power, and you juxtapose it against a moral cost, do a lot of those people make that decision? Maybe. Sure. But I think that when real change comes about, not fabricated change, not talking about change, actual changes to the process, to the system, I think it does. That kind of cavitation causes people discomfort. I think the only interest that I've seen, and I'm thinking of a particular friend of the show, who's ever demonstrated a level of interest in Biden, declared it as it's a return to normalcy in Washington. But what does that say about how we really look at Washington? Whether you like Donald Trump or not, he's a consequential character in the American story. I think that tonight, really, I mean, it was like watching two half versions of campaign rallies. We'll see what happens. You've got to get out and vote. And knowing what we know, if American voters want to play the ostrich and stick their head in the sand, then I've said it on the show before, and I don't say it to sound dark, I say it to sound realistic, we get what we deserve.
We do.
And I think the way that we combat that is through, and I mean this literally, is through mindful prayer, generous action, political engagement, intellectual stimulation, research, reading, familiarization, and mindfulness of what government means. Again, whether you like Donald Trump or not, I believe he has awakened the American electorate in ways that no one has, save maybe the campaign era of Obama in 2008. But that was short-lived. It was all about this campaign, and then it was just another president in the White House, right? I think Trump has held on to that, for better or worse, that energy for 4 years. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens.
All right. Well, it's been a great Thursday. We will return to our normal and scheduled time next week. And then we will have, I think, after that episode, we will have at least an idea as to what the election's going to have turned out.
We are 12 days away. 12 days away.
So this is important. Again, like Nick said, let's get out there. Let's get everyone to vote. Let's really push and drive this. This is a critical time. I'm the first one to say that the phrase "the most important election of our time" is just it's what we say every year because we want to give some sense of gravitas. I think this one really is. I think there's far more going on here than we realize. I think there is more. I think this election is far more consequential than people will realize. But let's get out there. Let's be active in our own communities. Let us promote what is good, what is helpful, and what is prosperous for all people. Nick, we'll see you next week.
Absolutely. Everybody be safe. Get out and vote. God bless. Take care.